Hello, guys, and welcome to the Yankee and the Brit podcast. It's just me today. It's Matty. For those of you who haven't watched the show before, or I'm the British part of it, if you can't tell by my accent. Jay is unfortunately not with us today, and that's because and unfortunately we couldn't do the show yesterday because of a change in schedule. Because Jay's mother unfortunately became unwell. She's much better now. So that's really good to hear. Thank you for all your kind words that went out to Jay on our social medias yesterday. So thank you all so much. Jay is just taking a day off today, but we'll be back for our next show to discuss the playoff picture. So everything's going well. We're back in the groove, and Jay is and his grandmother, his mother doing fine. So that's great news. Thank you very much for your kind words. Today we're going to be talking about the Week 18 reaction, basically, and I'm only going to really talk through the games that really mattered in this game, and we'll talk a little bit about Black Monday fallout. So if those are two categories that you're interested in, please feel free to continue watching the show. It's going to be great to have you along the ride. Please do comment, argue in the comments with others, argue with me in the comments. That's always good fun. And please do hit the subscribe button as well, because it helps us out a lot. And most importantly, what helps us out the most is if you find a clip of this that you like, clip it and share it on your socials as well. If we prove a point that you've been trying to make to your coworkers all week, then please do feel free to use our video to push that point home. I keep on saying it's we because I always feel like I'm normally here with Jay, but it's just me today. So Week 18 reactions. Let's get into it. So first, I'm going to talk about the Lions win against the Vikings. And normally coming off a win, I'd be a lot more positive about a team. The Lions, they've made it into the playoffs. They've made it into the playoffs. They've got a home playoff game, third seed. Very exciting times for the city of Detroit to have a home playoff game as well. They should really enjoy that, really get behind their team. It should be great. But something that's worried me about the Lions in the past couple of weeks is the attitude that Dan Campbell is fostering in that building. So they got a bad call against the Cowboys. Like, no one's denying that. It was a bad call. It was unfair on them. It would have also been unfair on the Cowboys to play that out if the refs didn't say either way. So they got a bad call, a really bad call, and that's unfortunate. But it does happen in this league. It's happened to pretty much every team. Can say they've had a bad call. Maybe not one quite as bad as that in a game. But Dan Campbell has come out of that acting like a child who is spitting his dummy out, tossing his toys out of the pram. And something that Jay's been saying all year is that Dan Campbell could be a problem in the locker room for guys. And he was taking it from the point of Dan Campbell can become irritating for players. And that's fair. Like that's fair enough. I could see that happening. But what I think has happened here is he's fostered this underdog mentality to a fault where it's like everybody hates us. And most coaches try and foster an element of that, but these guys really think the world is against them. And it looks like to me that they think the world is against us. We're not gonna make this. He even has Amon-Ra St. Brown coming out and whinging about not making it into the Pro Bowl. Like, okay, I think Amon-Ra was great this year, and I said he was snubbed for the Pro Bowl. I think he was a great wide receiver. If slot wide receiver was a position that was just a Pro Bowl position, your slot wide receiver, great, fantastic. That'd be good for them, good for Amon-Ra St. Brown. You would make the Pro Bowl if you were the slot wide receiver. But whinging and complaining about not making the Pro Bowl when there are so many great wide receivers in the NFL, I think is a real indictment of this team and this underdog mentality that they've fostered to a fault. They'll do trick plays all the way through games, and it's cost them in a few games this year where they've played like underdogs in games where they should have been playing like they're the shit, like they're the team to beat. they should be running some of these teams off the park. They should be controlling games entirely. They don't control games. Against the Vikings with Nick Mullins, they played their starters the entire game when, okay, if they win and the Cowboys lose, then great, like they're the second seed. But I understand the argument for playing instead of letting your players sit on the sidelines before playoff games. Like, that's understandable as well. But it's 1 week. It's not like that only really applies to me for teams that are going into the bye, to be perfectly honest. It's 1 week. You have, if they sat players, so they've thrown their toys out the pram. Dan Campbell feels he's going out there with a point to prove, like the world hates them. They're running an offensive line. Catch the Dan Skipper, who ironically is the number 70, who the referee said was eligible on that play against the Cowboys, was the person who caught the play on a 1st and 10, and it made them 5 yards. And it was almost like, haha, look at that, NFL. We can do this play. And it's like, right, cool. Yeah, awesome. Move on. And it feels like they're letting this get to them in this season. And I think it's going to hamper them in the playoffs because they're going to be playing against the Rams, who are a really solid team. And if they play like underdogs in this game and trick plays, Sean McVay's going to see that. And I think Dan Campbell's going to get out coached by playing his starters. Amon-Ra St. Brown has an injury. Doesn't look like it's going to keep him out against the Rams. Sam Laporta has quite a serious injury. We'll see if he makes it for the game against the Rams. I don't think he is going to make it, although they are keeping it under wraps from what I can see. I might have missed something, so let's see what comes out. But Sam Laporta will be a big miss for them. So they decided to play their starters, and they basically bet against the Cowboys and the Eagles losing. And Dan Campbell said something in a post-game interview which I found very interesting, where he said, we need to keep the later games entertaining, so we better make sure that we win against the we better make sure that we win this game to keep the later games entertaining. And it's like, Dan, like, it's not necessarily once you've made the playoffs, it's not your job to keep us entertained. It's not your job to keep us entertained. It's your job to get your team in the best fit for the playoff games. And that would have been to rest your players, in my opinion. Easy to say in hindsight. And if the Cowboys lost and they played their second string and the Lions lost and they could have made it if they won, then all right. But the Cowboys didn't lose. So it's null and void. So you lose Sam Laporta. Amon-Ra St. Brown has an injury as well. And he says that it's to keep the team entertained, but I think it's personally for his own ego. And I think his ego's hurt after that game against the Cowboys, where they did get a bad call, but he needs to be a head coach now and get over it, Okay, point number 2 in the running order of our show is the Cowboys did get that win against the Commanders, which the Lions were betting against. A few shows saying that the Cowboys should be on upset alert, which I found was something that maybe made me a bit more edgy at the start of the game than I should have been. The Cowboys started off slow. You're thinking back to Week 18 last year, where we lose against the Commanders, where we could have put pressure on the Eagles, but we lose against the Commanders. And it's when that field goal was blocked, I was like, oh my God, like, is this really happening? Aubrey hasn't missed all year. Obviously, that miss isn't on Aubrey at all. Like, just didn't block, and he was through before Aubrey could even kick the ball. But field goal blocked, interception that shouldn't have happened from Dak. I'm thinking, oh my God, is it going to be like last year? But they eventually picked it up and they overpowered the Commanders. Micah Parsons gets his 14th sack on the year. I think personally, Mike McCarthy took too long to bench Dak Prescott once that game was in the bag. We should have seen the backup quarterback, which they brought out as Cooper Rush. And I'm fine with that. I was annoyed at the time, and then texted Jay, and he said, "Oh, it's to get Cooper Rush some game time before the playoffs," which makes sense to me. Get him a little bit of game time. I would have liked to see Trey Lance. So once that game gets out of hand, 2 drives of Cooper Rush, 2 drives of Trey Lance. That I would have enjoyed. I would have enjoyed seeing that. I would have liked to have seen what we've got in Trey Lance. But we haven't really learned a lot from that game, although Cowboys do go away and win on the road. But again, a game that the Commanders are better off losing because it gets them better. It gets them the second draft pick as well. So better off that the Commanders lost. Cowboys needed to win, and they got it done in the end after a rocky start. So it was nice to see them have a rocky start, come back from it, and make their way through the playoffs. So Cowboys go for his NFC East champions. The second seed, obviously, some people say it was gifted to them. I think you play the whole season, so you can't rule it down to one play. But I do understand the point, because obviously the Lions did have that difficult call go against them. But the NFC East can't have been said to be gifted to them, because the Philadelphia Eagles lost. The Philadelphia Eagles lost. And no matter what the result was against the Lions, the Philadelphia Eagles losing this game against the New York Giants would have meant that the Cowboys were champions anyway, as long as they still won against the Commanders. And the Philadelphia Eagles continue their slide. Now, I didn't pick up on this at the start of the game, and obviously I've been labeled like a massive Eagles hater. I'm a Cowboys fan, so obviously they're not my favorite team in the entire league. So I can see why I could be labeled an Eagles hater. But since I've been calling them, they only have one double-digit win this year, which was against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who they're going to be playing in the playoffs. So me and Jay will talk more about their game against Tampa Bay in our next show. So do stay tuned for that. You'll see what we end up picking. But they haven't got a double-digit win all year. They've played a similar schedule to the Cowboys. Obviously, a few harder games in there because they play the Kansas City Chiefs as well, and they have a division champion schedule, so a little bit of a harder schedule, but not by a crazy amount than the other teams in the division. So there are those teams that they can wail on in the division. They played the Commanders close. They played the Giants close once and then lost against them the second time. So, like Philly, it's been a trend all year, but it's really fallen apart since the 26th of November. After that overtime win that they got against the Bills, and they did play some really good playoff-style winning football in that stretch where they beat the Chiefs away, they beat the Bills in overtime, and they played some really good winning football. But since then, they've gone 1-5 against weaker opposition. Obviously, they play the 49ers and the Cowboys in that stretch as well, but against the Seahawks, Giants, Cardinals, and then Giants again, they only won one of those games as well. So it's been a downward stretch. And look, I don't want to put too much focus on this Giants game, because obviously they were playing their second string in the second half. So it is harsh to wail on them all the way through this Giants game. But just a reminder, their starters played until late in the second quarter. Their starters scored 0 points against the Giants. They scored 0 points, and the defense conceded 24 points in the first half. Now, a touchdown in that, a touchdown or a field goal, I can't quite remember, did come once Mariota went in, because Mariota goes in just before the end of the half, so and immediately turns the ball over. So that could be, so that 24 points is a bit swayed. It's either 21 or 17. I can't quite remember. So apologies for that. But still, 24 points in the first half against the Commanders, where Tyrod Taylor had to come off for a little bit with a hurt thumb and then play the rest of the game with a hurt thumb. It's not a great result that you want going into the playoffs. And for those saying that, well, their starters went 24-0 in the first two quarters. So their second string actually put on a slightly better performance. But again, I think it was just damage limitation at that point. And once they realized that they weren't making it through, it was right to get Hurts off. But a bigger part of that is AJ Brown goes down, and it does look like he'll be playing it looks like he'll be playing their first game of the playoffs. It doesn't seem that serious. But Jalen Hurts mangles his middle finger, and he can play. Like, that's fine. Like, he can play on through that, but will he be able to throw the ball as well? And Jalen Hurts has looked hurt all season. In this game in particular, they look tired. They look lost. I'm not really sure what I'm going to be seeing when I see the Eagles. When I watch the Eagles at the moment, I'm not sure what I'll be seeing. Will I be seeing a good defense? Probably not. Doesn't look that way. I think they're the 28th defense in the league. After the 28th defense in the league after the 26th of November, and they are bottom 10 in the league in all defensive stats right now, even if you include their early season, because they've been able to be passed on all year. I don't want to, again, there's not too much that we should talk about in this game because by the second half, it's all over and they look forward to the playoffs. And I think it is best that their players get some rest. I think that they should have been resting their players from the start of this game, to be perfectly honest. Because I think we all thought that the Cowboys would handle the Commanders, really, when you're looking at it. And I think if their biggest problem is fatigue, then we should be resting the players. In this game, go play Tampa in Tampa, and the Lions upset if the Rams upset the Lions, which I think might happen again. Go watch our next show to find out more about that. Then you end up in Dallas playing against Dallas in the divisional round as well. So I think resting their players would have been the best way to go here, but the big trend in this past few weeks and what they need to sort before they go into the playoffs is what is their offensive identity? Because even in this season where AJ Brown has gone for 1,400 yards, but he's only gone for 400 yards. Oh no, he's only gone for 250 yards in his past 5 games, I believe, is what I've seen, and that includes a 94-yard game. So what is their offensive identity with Jalen Hurts? Jalen Hurts' injury that he picked up to his middle finger. He's been injured all year, which I've already mentioned, but he's been injured all year. And what have they actually done to make it easier for Jalen Hurts while he's been injured? Because QB draws still is a massive part of their offense. They're still running loads of QB draws. Jalen Hurts shouldn't be the main focal point of their run game if he's injured. Like, he's a great runner. It really adds to the offense. Like, it's something that they desperately need is Jalen Hurts to be fit and running the ball. But if he's injured, why is Jalen Hurts running the ball? That's silly to me, because he seems to not be breaking off those big games as well. But what is their identity on the offensive side of the ball? Do they run the ball? I think that they're 8th in rushing this year, but they seem to have gone away from running the ball this year. If it's spraying the ball downfield on large in huge pass game, the offensive line has been good. Like, the offensive line has been very good, enough to throw the ball, but they're not targeting their main wide receivers when they throw the ball down the field. So is it what we thought the Eagles was last year, where it's run the ball, run the ball, run the ball? Oh my God, AJ Brown is open, Devontae Smith is open. Like, is that what their identity is? Because they're not showing it this year. I think people are hung up too much on last year's Eagles. And something I want to address is this idea of the brain drain in Philadelphia. And it's why I think that Nick Sirianni could be on the hot seat if they lose against Tampa this week. I don't think he's on the hot seat if they win. If they win, Nick Sirianni continues to move forward as the Eagles head coach. I'm not saying he should be fired. I'm not saying he's the main problem there. They've had a lot of bad luck this season. They've had a lot of injuries. The defense is a shambles. That's not his side of the ball. So, but the brain drain, I think, is a bigger factor than we expected. Jonathan Gannon is now a head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Shane Steichen is now the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, and they both left. And the Colts are one game out from the playoffs against CJ Stroud's Texans, and Gannon's Cardinals with Kyler Murray back there. They look great. They beat the Eagles, obviously, but they look fantastic as well. But I think this is why you want, especially your young head coach, you don't want a CEO young head coach. You don't want that if you're building a team, because if you have a successful team, you lose both coordinators. So Nick Sirianni isn't a coordinator on either side of the ball, but he also doesn't have a coaching tree to call on. So when for instance, Pete Carrol is not anymore, but we'll talk about that in a sec. Pete Carrol is a CEO, head coach. He's a motivator. He motivates, but he leaves the defensive play calling and the offensive play calling to other guys. He obviously gets the final say with in their game plan and everything like that, because he can call plays. But he's more motivator in the Sirianni, like who Sirianni should be molding himself off, to be honest. Pete Carrol, that kind of coach. He has a coaching tree to call on when everything falls apart. Sirianni doesn't have that coach to be calling the plays, because if they're successful one year, which the Eagles were last year. They got to the Super Bowl. The Eagles' success has meant that both of their coordinators left the building. So neither side of the ball has the identity that it had last year. And I think they have a lot of experienced guys in the locker room. People are kind of blaming this season on Super Bowl hangover, but it's actually in reverse. Super Bowl hangover refers to the first part of the season. They were great in the first part of the season. I think they fell off as the brain drain became more apparent, and they weren't making more of their offense. So if they lose to Tampa, I think Sirianni could be on the hot seat. I'm not saying he should be. I just think he could be if they lose to Tampa. They need to find some good coordinators for next year, because neither defense or offense is looking good or has any identity right now. Will they win against Tampa Bay away from home? Let's see. And you guys can follow that on mine and Jay's next show. So subscribe, like, share, all of that so that you guys and others can watch our next show to see what we think about the Eagles playing against Tampa Bay and all the playoff fixtures as well. So next on the agenda, next on the running order, point 4 on the Matty Solo Show Week 18 reaction and Black Monday fallout is the Buffalo Bills proved me wrong. They made the playoffs. At the start of the year, I thought they weren't going to make the playoffs. I really did. I thought it was all going to fall apart. And midway through the year, I looked like I was right. It looked like it was going to fall apart. The whole thing looked like it was going to fall apart. And if the Dolphins just kept winning, and we'll talk about the Dolphins in a second, they're actually 0.5 on my agenda here. Then they would have missed the playoffs, because they put themselves in a hole by losing a lot of games early. And then they realized that it's almost like it switched on, like Josh Allen can't be our superhero all year. What we've been saying this entire time. Josh Allen cannot be our superhero all year. Yeah. So the Buffalo Bills have proved me wrong. The punt return, let's be real. When we're watching that game, the Dolphins were in control of that game for large swathes of it at the start until the punt return. The punt return completely changes the game. It ignites the Buffalo Bills. The Dolphins didn't really look like scoring from that point on. And the Dolphins get even more injuries. They get even more injuries as they go through. I need to stop looking at the comments, because we've got people commenting now, and then I immediately just drop off my game. So I'm just going to cover the comments for now. But everybody, do please keep commenting if you want to watch me be thrown off my game. But the Bills do. The Bills' defensive side of the ball has been dealing with a lot of injuries as well. Miami have started to deal with a lot of injuries. So it's kind of null and void in that game whether the Dolphins were injured, because the Bills have been injured as well. I think they've done a great recovery job this season. And Josh Allen had a great statistical game, like really great, threw for over 350 yards in that game. I think he had a really, really successful completion rate as well. Obviously 2 touchdowns, but he also has 2 ugly interceptions. And if those happen in the second half, they lose that game. So I'm still not on the Bills hype wagon. I'm still not totally convinced by them due to their injuries on the offensive side of the ball. But going up to Buffalo for playoffs, because they're now the 2nd seed in the AFC. They were either the 6th seed or the 2nd seed in the AFC last night. The other night, sorry. So going up to Buffalo makes a huge difference, especially this time of year. I imagine they're all going to be snow games. But I really do think it's in their best interest to keep the ball out of Josh Allen's hands as much as possible. Josh Allen should be their trump card, not their entire offense. In my opinion, they need to run the ball more. Josh Allen is the leading rusher. That's always going to be a problem for me. Get the ball more to James Cook, get the ball to Leonard Fournette. They look great as well. So I mean, they had a well done to the Bills for regaining their composure, getting themselves into the playoffs. They did a great job. But yeah, I wouldn't want to play superhero ball with Josh Allen in the playoffs. And Miami, I just have a question for you all to think about. Is Mike Daniel a fantastic game-winning coach, or is he just a lot of fun? Is he just a fun, goofy guy to watch in the press conferences, in the in-season documentaries about the training camps and all of that kind of stuff? Is he fun to watch there? And that's why we like him, or is he actually an excellent coach? Now, I'm going to err on the side of an excellent coach, but it's more of a game. It's more of a thing to think of as we go into the playoffs while we're watching Mike McDaniel. Does Mike McDaniel's style of offense win football games? Let's have a look against tough opposition, because offensive stats, top of the table. Top of the table. Offensive yardage. I believe they're in the top 5 in points scored. Maybe top 3 in points scored. So great stat sheet. Loads of fun to watch. Tyreek Hill obviously had a difficult year as well. Has had a difficult couple of weeks as well with his house burning down and the injury and those kind of things. Let's see what Tyreek Hill does when he goes into Arrowhead in what is being billed as his revenge game, going into Arrowhead because they wouldn't pay him all that money, which, I mean, they got a Super Bowl the year after they didn't pay him, but they would give a lot for him now, I imagine, Kansas City. So let's see. Let's see. I also wonder if Tua remains a problem. But I also am aware that was Dak's narrative for a long time, where he has all the pieces around him, can't get it done. So let's see what happens with Tua in the playoffs as well. Going into Kansas City, they'll be a fascinating team to watch, the Miami Dolphins, because they're so much fun to watch. Number one, you're not going to have a boring football game when you watch the Miami Dolphins and turn it on. So I would watch them. I think they were just bested by the Bills in kind of experience of those big moments, if I'm being perfectly honest. And Sean McDermott, shout out to Sean McDermott, because mid-season he looked like he was getting sacked immediately, and now they're in the playoffs, second seed. He's saved his job for another year. And the Bills, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't go on a great playoff run. Now I've kind of merged point 4 and point 5 together there, so we will move on to point 6 in this week 18 reaction and Black Monday Fallout show. Just me here, Matty. Point number 6 is CJ Stroud has concreted his position as offensive rookie of the year. The Houston Texans are in the playoffs. How many people thought that at the start of the year? Now be honest, like the video if you did, comment, I knew it about the Texans in the comments below, or not a chance if you didn't give them any chance of making it as well in the comments. So comment, because I'm genuinely interested as to who knew. Because I didn't pick them. I thought it was another building year. It semi reminds me of the Giants last year, and how ahead of schedule they were. But the thing is with that is Daniel Jones was never the reason that the Giants were ahead of schedule that next year, whereas CJ Stroud looks excellent. His ceiling seems a lot higher than what we thought it was. Basically, we didn't get a chance to see him play a lot of that game, a lot of this style of football, apart from the Georgia game that he played. It turns out that Georgia game that he played is what he does week in, week out. That's who he is. That's who CJ Stroud is. So well done to the Houston Texans. For me, CJ Stroud has concreted his position as the offensive rookie of the year. Another really efficient game, and he uses his number 1 wide receiver, Nico Collins. It's 9 receptions for 195 yards. Huge touchdown, I believe, on the second play of their first drive. So great play by them. The Colts really, it was quite funny to watch, really. The Colts really methodically moved down the field. Taylor running hard, looked really good in that game. The offensive line kicking, and they moved down the field, and you worry for the Colts at that point, and you think, oh my God. And then the first or the second play of their first offensive drive, they throw a huge bomb to Nico Collins. And Nico Collins looks like he's recovered from that injury. I think the Houston Texans are a really interesting prospect in the playoffs as well. Singletary even looks a bit faster than he did when he was playing in Buffalo. Like, he was running hard. D'Amico Ryans, for me, is coach of the year as well. I've seen a few people say Kevin Stefanski. Obviously, Harbaugh is going to get shouts for Coach of the Year with what he's done with the Ravens, and there are a few candidates. Dan Campbell is still in the ring, but if you're watching early on in the show, you'll see why I think that's ridiculous, because I think he's the entire problem with Detroit, and the reason that they may not make it might be Dan Campbell. And I was a fan of his towards the start of the season. So I think that D'Amico Ryans is the head coach of the year for me. But they'll be an interesting team going into the playoffs because they have their assets in the right places. They look solidly built. Now, do I think they'll go against the Browns? Again, you'll have to watch mine and Jay's show to find out what we think about these playoff matchups. But I think they're an interesting prospect. Something that does really worry me, especially when they're going into a game against the Browns, is they did concede 188 yards on the ground against the Colts. And Jonathan Taylor looked fantastic as well. That's, again, the Colts should be really proud of what they've got done this year. Shane Steichen, after leaving the Eagles, what a great game that you've had. So congratulations, Shane Steichen. Yeah, they had a great season considering what went on there, and they might have a worse record next year when they start Anthony Richardson, but we'll learn more about who Anthony Richardson is and if they have the guy, because they could have a worse record, but at least they've got the data collection points, and that's progress in the long term next year. So let's see. Okay, final point in our Week 18 reactions, but not the final point of this show. Final point in the Week 18 reactions is the Green Bay Packers make the playoffs. They're the youngest team in the league, and they have a lot of excitement looking forward. They have a lot of excitement to go forward. They're the youngest team in the league. Sunderland, for example, who, by the way, lost against Newcastle 3-0. It was horrible to watch, not good, but Sunderland are the youngest team in the championship, and I know what it's like when you have the youngest team in your league, and they're doing well. You have so much hope going forward because you think we can build on this, we can build on this, we can build on this. Does the NFL really go that way? Do you get that much time to build on young players? Do these young players have good seasons and leave for big contracts somewhere else, especially when you're a young guy in Green Bay? Let's find out. Let's see how long they can keep this team together. But situationally, not a great defense. They held Chicago to 9 points. We'll talk more about Chicago in the Black Monday Fallout part of the show. We'll talk more about Chicago. But they held Chicago to 9 points. But so they had a good game this week, but really situationally not great on defense. Jordan Love has looked really solid for the past few weeks. I can't really praise CJ Stroud and not show some love for Love's performance. He went 27 of 32 for 316 yards and 2 touchdowns. Really much against a really much improved Bears defense as well. Remember, the Bears defense has been locking teams down, so they did really great. Had some great play. Did well to make it into the playoffs. Obviously, a few things fell their way and everything like that. But congratulations to the Green Bay Packers. You get to come to Dallas. And as Jay very rightly puts in the comments here, the Cowboys have looked into the easiest path to the NFC Championship game because they go through the Packers and then they either go through the Lions or if there's an they either go through the Lions or Tampa or the Eagles, depending on how upsets fall and all of that kind of thing, or the Lions if everything kind of falls into place and there's no upsets and all the home teams win. So we shall see. As I mentioned at the start of the show, Jay, saying that they looked into it. See, this is what I'm more about, Leicester. Thank you very much. How about them Cowboys? But as I mentioned at the start, of the show, saying they looked into it, it is over 18 games. You can't just put it down to one play. However, I did mention that the Lions did get screwed in that game, so they can feel bad about it, and that's totally fine. But the season's over 18 games, so looked into it, unfair. However, get where you're coming from on that point, as we always do. Even when we argue, we always know where the other one is coming from. So, the Cowboys played a great game. We'll see the Packers at the Cowboys. And if you want to see more about that and you want to watch more about that, then please watch our show coming up with Jay in the next couple of days. Look out for that. To get more answers on that, subscribe and ring the bell. Because if you ring the bell, then you hear about our shows. So subscribe and ring the bell. That's what you want, right? Get notifications from when our shows are dropping 30 minutes before they drop. Now, I believe I'm supposed to play an ad here. So I'm going to play an ad. And we're going to hope it's the right ad. And I'm going to take a quick break before we go into our Black Monday fallout.
What's up, everybody? It's Jay from Yankee and the Brit bringing you some exciting news. King Palms and Yankee and the Brit are teaming up together to give you an amazing deal. Head over to kingpalm.com, use promo code KPYNB to save 20% off your entire order. That's right, 20% off your entire order just by using the promo code KPYNB. If you want to enhance your smoking experience, King Palms has you covered. Innovative designs, premium quality, and they're all natural. So make sure you go over to kingpalm.com and use the promo code KPYNB at checkout to save 20% off your entire order.
Yeah, obviously, I believe that's only available to our US listeners. But yeah, I don't smoke. I don't really know much about it because I come from a country where smoking weed is illegal. So yeah, if you're one of our US listeners, then use our promo code to get that deal and use that promo code. It'll be great for you to have a good time. Obviously, only available to our US listeners. Now, let's get into the Black Monday fallout. And I think this has been a very surprising, very, very, very surprising Black Monday for me because I remember I was talking before on the Sunday saying, "Oh, coaches are about to get fired next week." Coaches are about to get fired tomorrow, and actually only Ron Rivera and Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith actually got fired on the Sunday on the midnight before midnight on Monday, so he didn't even make it to Black Monday. Arthur Smith. But they the I was surprised as to how few coaches actually got fired on Monday, but then we've had some very surprising announcements as you go through. So I said we'd talk about the Bears. Well, let's start with Matt Eberflus then in this running order. So Bears look like they are holding on to Matt Eberflus, which I think is a massive mistake. And I think this may mean that they're holding on to Justin Fields as well, which I think would be an even bigger mistake. Eberflus leaves me uninspired. Sweat was the only reason his defense worked before they got Sweat in. They looked terrible on the defensive side of the ball as well as on the offensive side of the ball. And he's obviously the defensive guy. There's been quite a lot of stuff happening to his backroom staff and to his backroom staff throughout the season. I'm not sure that Eberflus really leaves inspiration in this team. And it's great that he calls on one side of the play, on one side of the offense, that's on the defensive side of the ball, and they have looked like they've improved. That's great, but I think from an organizational point of view, it leaves me to believe that they're going to stagnate in an organizational point of view. They're happy with this season, and with probably one of the biggest offenses, the biggest off seasons in Bears history is coming up this year. They have 2 picks in the first round of the draft, both relatively high up, including the first overall pick in the draft. I think they're going to hold on to Fields and trade down. I really do, because they listen too much to the people of Chicago. But Fields has showed us that he can't pass you out of trouble. If you're from behind, you're in trouble if you've got Fields. Fields' best run in his career is full of mediocre stats. Fields is a mediocre quarterback. The Bears are a mediocre organization, and that's proved it by keeping Matt Eberflus, who is a mediocre coach. While there's so much talent out there, you hold on to Matt Eberflus. That makes no sense to me. That makes no sense to me because you have so much appeal, because you have a good defense, first overall pick in the draft, good cap room, another overall pick in the another first round pick. You are in a huge market. Chicago is apparently a really fun city to be in. Like, you have so much going for you, and you're sticking with Matt Eberflus when there's so much talent that's out there coaching right now. And we'll talk more about that talent as we go through. One of them is Vrabel. So Vrabel leaves the Titans, which I was very surprised about. When the reports on this came out, I was like, oh, it's because he's moving to New England. They say he's about to be fired, but it's because he's moving to New England. Vrabel is fired by the Titans. Vrabel is free to talk to whoever he wants because he's been fired by the Titans. And this is the end of an era in Tennessee. Henry's leaving, Tannehill's leaving, and Vrabel's leaving. That group that took them to the AFC Championship game, they gave them an identity. Vrabel, I believe, won Coach of the Year in 2020 or 2021. It's an end of an era there, and I think they've decided that Vrabel took them as far as he could take them as an organization. And okay, fair enough. If that's the way you feel, I'm not sure I really feel the same way on that with Vrabel, but I think Vrabel is earmarked for the New England Patriots anyway. And he'll do well wherever he goes. He could do well in Washington. He can do well in Carolina. He can do well in New England. I think he really built the culture in that organization. He gave them an AFC Championship game, and he gave them an identity as well. I think he's a really good coach. And somewhere else I think he may be a great coach is actually in Seattle. I think he embodies a lot of what Seattle is about. And that's because Pete Carroll is no longer the head coach in Seattle. 14 years. Pete Carroll is no longer the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. He's become an advisor in Seattle. Now, that's what's interesting about that, because I understand after 14 years, you can get to a point where you've taken us as far as you can go. He's not made the playoffs this year after expecting a leap forward from them making the playoffs, making a good run with Geno Smith the year before. And it's kind of as far as you can go. But Pete Carroll becoming an advisor, can you imagine Pete Carroll being a hands-off coach? Hands-off in any part of the organization. Can you imagine that with Pete Carroll? The chewing, energy-filled 70-year-old guy. Can you imagine him being hands-off in the organization? I think he's going to be a head coach somewhere else. It could be back to college. Imagine if John Harbaugh comes up and he becomes the head coach. Pete Carroll ends up becoming the head coach of Michigan, or Saban is retiring. Imagine Pete Carroll in Alabama. There's places where Pete Carroll can go in college. I think he'll stay on as an advisor. If he goes down to college, he can stay on as an advisor. But also, there's NFL teams out there that Pete Carroll could do a lot of good for. Pete Carroll is an energetic guy. I remember when we watched the Seahawks the first game of the season, and they looked like they were dead on the water. And me and Jay came on and said, that's not a Pete Carroll team. If you want energy in your organization, you bring in Pete Carroll. That's who you bring. I'm very surprised that he's going into an advisor role. I'm also obviously surprised that he's not the head coach anymore, because I don't think he did a bad job this year. And he also said he was going to remain as the head coach the day before he gets moved into this advisory role. So let's see what happens with Pete Carroll. I think the biggest piece to fall, or there's two big pieces to fall, and we'll talk about them before we head out, because Ron Rivera leaving. Yeah, called it. Obviously, Arthur Smith leaving. I'm surprised that they actually did it, but I think it's the right thing for the Falcons to do. I think Arthur Smith took them as far as they can take them. I finished with the same record 3 years in a row. They have great weapons, great talent that he's not managed to unlock. It is unfortunate that they've never got the quarterback for him to do anything with, but I see why they're moving on from Arthur Smith as well. I think Arthur Smith might go back down to college as well. There's a few big jobs that are waiting for a guy like Arthur Smith to go into, or he could be an offensive coordinator somewhere in the NFL. Maybe he becomes the Eagles offensive coordinator. Who knows? But one of the big pieces to fall that's in the NFL is what's happening to Bill Belichick. What's happening with Bill? Is Bill the New England Patriots head coach still? Because Bill Belichick comes out and says he's happy to give up personnel. He's happy to give up personnel things to stay in New England. He's happy to give up his GM title. Happy to have people come in and advise him. Happy to stop talent recruiting. Great. Or Awesome. That's exactly what Bill Belichick should do, by the way. That's his weakness. Bill Belichick, the GM, not good. Bill Belichick, the head coach, one of the greatest of all time. So we've not heard much after this Bill Belichick, Robert Kraft meeting, which was to discuss his future. So I can't see him staying. I think if you're going to bring a GM in, you kind of have to get rid of Bill Belichick. You have so much talent on the market. You have Vrabel's out there now. To go get him, I think Vrabel would be the perfect coach because he's not from that Bill Belichick tree, but he does know what it's like to be a champion and a patriot. So you do have that. I think if Bill Belichick became the coach of the Washington Commanders, they could potentially be dangerous because there's a lot to do there. When we look at I forgot the owner's name. But who he signs for the 76ers, he signs guys like Doc Rivers, like he signs real coaches. Real coaches with experience. He doesn't go with the young guy from what we've seen with the 76ers. So I think Bill Belichick as a Washington Commander is an interesting prospect. And obviously terrifies me as a fan of the Cowboys in the NFC, sorry. I never understand how these talk show hosts go like whole 45 minutes to an hour-long shows without sneezing. I think it's incredible, especially guys like Colin Cowherd who just do it off the dome by themselves. Don't have anybody to fill in while they have a cheeky sneeze while none of us noticed and the camera goes on somebody else. How do you do a show like this without sneezing? So, excuse me, everybody. But yeah, what's going on with Bill? I think he's going to be the Washington Commanders head coach in the future. I think that's the destination that makes the most sense for him. However, with him saying a relinquished GM, I think he should do that whichever organization he goes to next. Relinquish GM duties. Shouldn't be in charge of personnel anymore. And that's, again, why if Chicago pushed up a big enough amount of money to Bill Belichick, is he not going to do a better job than Eberflus? It makes me think that they've already asked. And they've all said no, which would be crazy. And the other big one to fit in, and it fits in the same realm as Bill Belichick really is, I think he would be great for the Commanders. I think he would be great for the Bears if they were looking for a coach, but now looks like it'll either be the Commanders or LA is what's going on with John Harbaugh. Now, I saw Jay commented free Harbaugh, so maybe I've missed something. Maybe I've missed something in Michigan, keeping him there. But why does Harbaugh want to still deal with the petulance of the NCAA? He's done everything he set out in Michigan to do. He left the 49ers to go to Michigan, or he was fired by the 49ers, went to Michigan, reset his alma mater, a place that he loves. He loves Michigan more than anything in the world. All of his family are connected to Michigan. He loves Michigan. He's sorted out his alma mater. He's got them their championship again. What else has he got to prove? Come back to the NFL. Show that you can do it with an NFL team because he's a great coach and there's still people out there that doubt him, which I think is absolutely crazy. But John Harbaugh should be in the NFL. They're a really close-knit family, the Harbaughs. Really close-knit. So he wants to be in the North. He wants to be around his parents, around Michigan. Obviously, his brother's in Baltimore. So the Bears make a lot of sense there. The Commanders make loads of sense there. There's loads of, they love being around their family. It's a great place for him to be. But the job that's the most enticing, especially for a guy who did so well in Stanford as well, is the LA Chargers job. Now, the LA Chargers job is probably the best job on here, as long as you don't care about history and you're not that bothered about ownership. But I think there are two things that Harbaugh is interested in, because you get Justin Herbert, you get the ability to go in and they need to completely revamp the wide receiver room. They've got so much talent on defense that's not being utilized, so they need to find out a way to utilize all of that. But once they've done all of that, then what's stopping the Chargers from being a great team now? Do I want to be in a division with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid? Maybe not. But Washington have Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts, who obviously aren't Patrick Mahomes, but at least there's two of them. But you have Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts. Who are the other teams that are available? Carolina, nobody wants that job. That's a young coach's job, but do the young coaches even want do the young coaches even want that job? Maybe Tennessee might be a good place for Harbaugh to go, but you may as well go to LA if you're going to be that far away from the family. Now, New England's an interesting prospect, but personnel is so dull there. They don't have the quarterback. They have some defensive personnel that's great, but they have no offensive personnel. So I see the jobs for John Harbaugh as Washington, not the Bears anymore because they seem to be staying with Eberflus, but I'm shocked if they didn't offer Harbaugh a job, and the Chargers if he wants to be away from his family. But Seattle as well could be an interesting job for them, for anybody to take on. So there's loads of great jobs out there. There's obviously the young coaches out there as well. The offensive coach for the Texans has got a few interviews. Obviously Johnson from the Lions has got a few interviews as well. So the coaching wheel continues to spin. The NFL season, the regular season that is, has run its course and come to an end. This was our final show for the regular season. We move on into the playoffs now and playoff football. If you enjoyed this video, guys, please do feel free to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell so you can stay on top of when we're going to be doing shows again. And most importantly, we'd love it for our next show if you came and joined us. And if you commented below on this show what your playoff predictions are, because I've got a few games that I'm not sure on. So let's see what their playoff predictions are. Thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate you all. That's us. That's it for this particular show. Please do come and join us again. Cheerio.